Hello, little angels. I bring you a wonderful and lovely story for you to listen and enjoy. Today's fourth adventure name is The Ho Ho Wizard. Welcome to the land of magic and adventure. One day, when Peter and Molly ran down to see Chinky, the pixie, in their playroom, they found him reading a letter and groaning loudly. "What's the matter, Chinky?" said the children, in surprise. "Oh, I have had a letter from my cousin Gobo," said Chinky. "Gobo says that my village is very unhappy because a wizard has come to live there called Ho Ho. He is a horrid fellow and walks about saying Ho Ho all the time, catching the little pixies to help him in his magic, and putting all kinds of spells on anyone that goes against him. I am very unhappy." "Oh, Chinky, we are so sorry," said the children at once. "Can't we help?" "I don't think so," said Chinky sadly. "But I would very much like to go off in the wishing chair to my village next time it grows wings, if you don't mind." "Of course," said the children. Then Molly cried out in delight and pointed to the magic chair. "Look, it's growing wings. Now, how lovely! It must have heard what we said." "We will all go," said Peter, feeling excited to think that yet another adventure had begun. "Oh no," said Chinky at once. "I'd better go alone. This wizard is a horrid one. He might quite well catch you too, as you are clever children, and then think how dreadful I would feel." "I don't care," said Peter. "We are coming." He and Molly went to the chair and sat firmly down in it. Chinky went to it and sat down too, squeezing in between the two. "You are such nice children," he said happily. The chair creaked, and before it could fly off, the pixie cried out, "Go to the village of apple pie." It flew slowly out of the door, flapping its rose red wings. The children were used to flying off in the magic chair now, but they were just as excited as ever. The village of apple pie, how magic it sounded! It didn't take time for long to get there. The chair put them down in the middle of the village street and was at once surrounded by an excited crowd of pixies, who shook hands with Chinky and asked him 100 questions. He talked at the top of his voice, explained who the children were and why he had come. Then suddenly there was a great silence, and everyone turned pale. The Ho Ho Wizard was coming down the street. He was a little fellow, with a long flowing cloak that swirled around as he walked and showed its bright golden lining. On his head he wore a round, tight cap set with silver bells that tinkled loudly. He wore 3 pairs of sunglasses on his long nose, and a beard that hung in 3 pieces down to his waist. He really was a queer looking fellow. "Ho ho," he said, as he came near the pixies. "What have we here? Visitors? And bless us all, this is a wishing chair, as sure as dogs have tails. Well, well, well." Nobody said anything at all. The wizard prodded the chair with a long stick and then turned to the children. Ho ho, he said, blinking at them through his pairs of glasses. Ho ho, so you have a magic chair. Pray, come to have a cup of cocoa with me this morning, and I will buy your chair from you. But we don't want to sell it, began Peter at once. The wizard turned round on him, and from his eyes there came what looked like real sparks. He was very angry. How dare you refuse me anything? He cried. I will turn you into a. We will come in half an hour, stammered Chinky, pushing Peter behind him. This boy did not understand how important you are, Mr. Wizard. Brr, said the wizard, and stopped off, his cloak flying out behind him. Now, what are we to do? Said Peter in dismay. Can't we get into the chair and fly off? Chinky, do let's. No, no, don't, cried all the pixies at once. If you do, Ho Ho will punish the whole village, and that will be terrible. Stay here and help us. Come to my cousin Gobo's cottage and let us think, said Chinky. So the two children went with him, and Gobo, who was really very like Chinky, to a little crooked cottage at the end of the village. It was beautifully clean and neat, and the children sat down to eat coconut cakes and drink lemonade. Everyone was rather quiet. Then Peter's eye began to twinkle, and he leaned over to Gobo. I say, Gobo, I have you by any chance got a spell to put people to sleep? He asked. Of course, said Gobo, puzzled. But why? Well, I have a fine plan, said Peter. What about putting old Ho Ho to sleep? What's the use of that? Said Chinky and Gobo. Well, when he is asleep, we will pop him into the magic chair, take him off somewhere and leave him, and then go back home ourselves, said Peter. That would get rid of him for you, wouldn't it? My goodness, that's an idea, cried Chinky, jumping up from his seat in excitement. Gobo, if only we could do it. Listen, where is the sleepy spell? Here, said Gobo, opening a drawer and taking out a tiny yellow things like a mustard seed. Well, Peter has a bag of chocolates, said Chinky, and we could put the sleepy spell into one of them and give it to Ho Ho. But how do we know he would take the right chocolate? Asked Molly. We will empty out all of them except one, answered Chinky, and that one Peter shall carry in the bag in his hand, and he must carry it as though it was something very precious indeed. And Ho Ho is sure to ask him what it is. And if Peter says it is a very special chocolate that he is not going to part with, or something like that, the old wizard is sure to be greedy enough to take it from him and eat it. Then he will fall asleep, and we will take him off in the chair to old Dame Tap Tap, who will be so pleased to have him. He once tried to turn her into a ladybird, so I don't think she will let him go in a hurry. Good idea, cried everyone, and Gobo danced round the room so excitedly that he fell over the coal scuttle and sent the fire irons clanking to the floor. That made them all laugh, and they felt so excited that they could hardly empty out Peter's bag of chocolates on the table and choose one for the sleepy spell. They chose a chocolate with a violet on top because it looked so grand. Peter made a little hole in it and popped in the spell. Then he left the rest of the chocolates with Gobo, who said he would enjoy them very much, put the violet one into the bag, and went off to get the wishing chair with the others. It was still standing in the marketplace, its red wings hanging down, for it was tired. Chinky and Peter thought that they might as well carry it to Ho-Ho's cottage, which was only in the next street. So off they went, taking it on their shoulders. Ho-Ho was waiting for them, his willy face watching from a window. He opened the door and they all went in with the chair. I see you have brought me the chair, said Ho-Ho. Very sensible of you. Now sit down and have a cup of cocoa. He poured out some very thin cocoa for them, made without any milk, and looked at them all sharply. He at once saw that Peter was holding something very carefully in his hand, which he did not even put down when he was drinking his cocoa. What have you got in your hand? He asked. Something I want to keep, said Peter at once. Show me, said the wizard eagerly. No, said Peter. Show me, ordered the wizard angrily. Peter pretended to be frightened and at once put the paper bag on the table. The wizard took it and opened it. He took out the chocolate. Oh ho, the finest chocolate I ever saw, he said, and licked it and see what it tastes like. Don't eat it, oh, don't eat it, cried Peter at once, pretending to be most upset. It's mine. Well, now, well, now it's mine, said the wizard, and he popped it into his mouth and chewed it up. And no sooner had he swallowed it that his head began to nod. His eyes closed, and he snored like 20 pigs grunting. The spell has worked! The spell has worked! Cried Peter, jumping about in excitement. Now, Peter, there is no time to jump and yell, said Chinky hurriedly. The spell may stop at any time, and we don't want to wake up the wizard till we have got him to dummy tap taps. Help me to put him into the chair. Between them, they dumped the sleeping wizard into the chair. Then Molly sat on one arm, Peter sat on the other, and Chinky sat right on the top of the bed. To dummy tap tap, he cried. At once the wishing chair flapped its idle wings, flew out of the door and up into the air, cheered by all the pixies in the village. What a thrill that was! In about 5 minutes, the chair flew downwards again to a small cottage set right on the top of a windy hill. It was Dummy Tap Tap's home. The chair flew down to the front door, outside which there was a wooden bench. The three of them pulled the snoring wizard out of the chair and put him on the bench. Then Chinky took hold of the knocker and banged it hard 4 times. Rat, rat, rat. He yelled at the top of his voice, Dummy, tap, tap, here is a present for you. Then he and the children bundled into the wishing chair again, and off they flew into the air. Leaning over to see the old dummy crying out in astonishment and delight when she opened the door and found the wizard Ho Ho sleeping outside. What a shock for him when he wakes up, said Chinky with a grin. Well, children, many thanks for your help. You have saved Apple Pie Village from a very nasty well fellow. It will be nice to think of him dusting Damit Tap Tap's kitchen and getting water for her from the well. I guess she will make him work hard. Ho ho, roared the children as the chair flew down to their playroom. Perhaps the wizard won't say ho ho quite so much to Damit Tap Tap. No, he might get a sparking if he did, grinned Chinky. Well, here we are. See you tomorrow, children. Now, the fifth adventure. The old man. The wishing chair had not grown its wings for a long time. Chinky and the children had become quite tired of waiting for another adventure. Molly thought perhaps the magic had gone out of it and it might be just an ordinary chair now. It was most disappointing. It was a lovely fine day and Peter wanted to go for a walk. Come with us, Chinky, he said. It's no use staying in the playroom with the chair. It won't grow its wings today. So Chinky the pixie squashed his pointed ears under one of Peter's old caps, put on an old overcoat of Peter's, and set out with the children. Jane, the housemaid, saw them going and she called after them. If you are going out, I shall give the playroom a good clean out. It hasn't been done for a long time. All right, called back Molly. We won't be home till dinner time. They had a lovely walk and ran back to the playroom about dinner time. It did look clean. Jane was just finishing the dusting. Chinky waited outside for he did not want to be seen. But suddenly Peter turned pale and said, Oh, where is the chair? Molly, where is the chair? Oh, do you mean that old chair? Said Jane, gathering up her brushes. An old man came for it. He said it had to be mended or something. He took it away. She went up to the house, leaving the two children staring at each other in dismay. Chinky ran in, and how he stared when he heard the news. I know who the old man must have been, he cried. It's old Bone Lazy who lives at the foot of Breezy Hill. He hates walking, so I expect he thought he would get hold of our wishing chair. If he could, then he would be able to go everywhere in it. How can we get it back? Asked Molly, almost in tears. I don't know, said Chinky. We will have a try. Anyhow, come back here after dinner and we will go to his cottage. So, after their dinner, the two children ran back to the prayer room. They found a most astonishing sight. There was no Chinky there, only an old woman dressed in a black shawl that was drawn right over her head. Who are you? Asked Molly. Then she gave a cry of surprise, for when the old woman raised her head, Molly saw the merry face of Chinky the pixie. This disguise is part of my plan for getting back our magic chair, explained Chinky. Now, I want you to go with me to Bon Lazy's cottage, and I shall pretend to fall down and hurt myself outside. You will run up and help me to my feet. Then you will help me to Bon Lazy's cottage. Knock at the door and explain that I am an old lady who needs a drink of water and a rest. And whilst we are in the cottage, we look around to see if our chair is there, cried Peter. What a marvelous plan! They set off. Chinky took them through a little wood they never seemed to have seen before. And when they came out on the other side of it, they were in a country that looked quite different. The flowers were brighter, the trees were full of blossoms, and brilliant birds flew here and there. I never knew it. It was so easy to get to fairyland, said Molly in surprise. It isn't, said Chinky with a grin, lifting up his black shawl and peeping at the children merrily. You couldn't possibly find it unless you had met me with me. Is that Bone Lazy's cottage? Asked Molly, pointing towards a cottage at the foot of a nearby hill. Chinky nodded. I'll go on ahead now, he said. Then you must do your part as we have planned. Good luck. He hobbled on in front, looking for all the world like an old woman. When he came just by the cottage, Chinky suddenly gave a dreadful groan and fell to the ground. At once, the children rushed up and pulled the pretending old woman to her feet. From the corner of his eye, Peter saw someone looking out of the window of the cottage at them. Quick, quick, he cried very loudly to Molly. This poor woman has fainted. We must take her into this cottage and ask for a drink of water for her. She must rest. They half carried Chinky to the cottage door and knocked loudly. An old man opened it. He had narrow, cunning eyes, and the children didn't like the look at him at all. They explained about the old woman and took her into the cottage. Could you get a drink of water? Said Molly. The old chap left the room, grumbling. I shall have to go to the well, he muttered crossly. Good, thought Peter. It will give us time for a long round. But to their great disappointment, their wishing chair was not to be seen. The cottage only had the one room, so it did not take them long to hunt all around it. Before they had time to say anything, the old man came back with a jug of water. Molly took it from him, and then she suddenly noticed a very curious thing. A great draught was coming from a big chest of drawers standing in a corner. She stared at it in surprise. How could it be making such a wind round her feet? It was only a chest of drawers. But wait a minute. Was it only a chest of drawers? Quick as lightning, Molly upset the jug of water and then turned to Bo Lazy in apology. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have upset the water. How very careless of me. I wonder if you would be good enough to get some more. The old man shouted at her rudely, snatched up the jug, and went down the garden to the well. The other stared at Molly in surprise. Whatever did you do that for? Said Peter. There is something queer about that chest of drawers, said Molly. There is a strange wind coming from it. Feel, Chinky, I upset the jug just to get the old man out of the way for a minute. Stars and moon, he's changed our chair into a chest, cried Chinky. It must have grown wings, but we can't see them because of Bone Lazy's magic. Quick, all of you, jump into a drawer and I will wish us away. The children pulled open two of the enormous drawers and sat inside. Chinky sat on the top, crying, Home, wishing chair, home. The chest groaned and the children heard a flapping noise. Just at that moment, the old man came into the room, again with a jug of water. How he stared! But before he could do anything, the chest of drawers rose up in the air, knocked the water out of his hand, almost pushed him over, and squished itself out of the door. You won't steal our chair again, shouted Chinky, and he flung his black shawl neatly over Bone Lazy's head. The chest rose high into the air, and then a funny thing happened. It began to change back into the chair they all knew so well. Before they could think what to do, the children found themselves sitting safely on the seat, for the drawers all vanished into cushions. Chinky was on the top of the bag, sighing for joy. That was a marvelous plan of yours, said Peter. Well, Molly was the sharpest, laughed Chinky. It was she who noticed the drop over the chest. Good old Molly. Our sixth adventure. Poor lost Chinky. Once a dreadful thing happened when the children were adventuring on the whistling tear. It had grown its wings most conveniently when all three were in the playroom. So they jumped on and were soon flying high in the air. As they were flying, they heard a loud droning noise and looked around. It's an airplane, shouted Peter. I say, it's very near us, cried Molly. So it was. It didn't seem to see them at all. It flew straight at them, and the edge of one widespread wing just touched their flying chair, giving it a tremendous jerk. Molly and Peter were sitting tightly in the seat, but Chinky was on the back, and he was jolted right off the chair. Molly clutched at him as he fell, but she only just touched him. The two children watched in the greatest dismay as he fell down and down and down. Oh, Peter, cried Molly in despair. Poor Chinky. Whatever will happen to him? The aeroplane flew on steadily, never guessing that it had touched a wishing chair. Peter turned pale and looked at Molly. We must make the chair go down and see if Chinky is hurt, he said. Oh dear, what a dreadful thing to happen. Chair, fly down to earth. The chair flapped its red wings and flew slowly back down to the ground. It stood there and the children jumped off. They were in open country with wide fields all around them. There was no sign of Chinky at all. They heard the sound of someone chanting a song and saw coming towards them a round, fat little man carrying a bundle on his head. Hi, called Peter. Have you ever seen a little pixie falling out of the sky? Is that a riddle? Said the round little man, grinning stupidly. I can ask you one too. Have you seen a horse that quacks like a duck? Don't be silly, said Molly. This is serious. Our friend has fallen out of the sky. Well, tell him not to do it again, said the little round man. All that fell out of the sky today was a large snowflake. Good morning. He went on his way, his bundle bobbing on his head. The children were very angry. Making a joke about a serious thing like poor Chinky falling out of the sky, said Molly, with tears in her eyes. Horrid fellow. Here is someone else, said Peter. Hi, stop a minute. The someone was another round, fat person, also carrying a bundle on her head and singing a little song. She stopped when she saw the children. Have you seen a pixie falling out of the sky? Asked Peter. No. Have you? Said the round little woman, grinning. Of course, said Molly impatiently. Fiber, said the round woman. A big snowflake fell out of the sky, but nothing else. They have got snowflakes on the brain, said Peter, as the woman went on her way, singing, Come on, Molly, we would better go and look for Chinky ourselves. We know that it was somewhere near here that he fell. We will carry the chair between us so that we may have it safely. I don't trust these stupid people. They carried the chair along and came to a marketplace. It was full of the same round, fat people, all humming and singing. A town crier was going round the market, ringing a bell, crying, Ois, ois, Dame Apple Pie has lost her spectacles, oe, oe. Then Peter had a splendid idea. I say, Molly, let's tell the town crier to shout out about Chinky. We will offer a reward to anyone that can tell us about him. Someone must have seen him fall. So, before very long, the town crier was ringing his bell and crying loudly, Oe, oe, our reward is offered to anyone having news of a pixie who fell from the sky. Oe, oe. Molly and Peter stood on a platform so that people might know to whom to go if they had news. To their delight, there came quite a crowd of people to them. We have news, they cried, struggling to get to Peter first. Well, where did you see the pixie fall? Asked Peter of the first little man. Sir, I saw a big snowflake fall in the buttercup field. Don't be foolish. Don't be foolish, said Peter. I said a pixie, not a snowflake. Don't you know the difference between pixies and snowflakes? We all know that snowflakes fall from the sky. That is not news. Next, please. But the next person said the same thing, and the next, and the next, and the next. It was most annoying and very disappointing. We want our reward, suddenly shouted someone. We have given you news, but you have given us no reward. You haven't given us the right news, shouted back Peter angrily. That doesn't matter, shouted the little folk, looking angry. They looked rather funny too, because for some reason or other they all carried their bundles and baskets balanced on their heads. Give us our reward. They swung and towards the platform on which the two children were standing, and Molly and Peter suddenly felt frightened. I don't like this, Molly, said Peter. Let's go. These stupid creatures think that pixies and snowflakes are exactly the same, and we certainly can't give them all a reward. Climb into the chair. Molly jumped into the chair which was just near them on the platform. Peter sat on the arm and cried out loudly, Home chair, quickly. The chair flapped its wings and rose up, but didn't rise very high, only just above the heads of the angry people. Its legs began to jerk in and out, and to Peter's enormous astonishment, the chair kicked off bundles, pots, and baskets from the heads of the furious marketers. Peter began to laugh, for really it was most comical to see the chair playing such a trick, but Molly was in tears. What's the matter? Asked Peter, drying her tears with his handkerchief. It's Chinky, sobbed Molly. I did love him so. Now I feel we shall never see him again. Peter's eyes filled with tears too. He was such a good friend, he said. Oh, Molly, It would be so dreadful if we never saw him again. They flew home in silence. The chair flew in at the playroom door and the children jumped off. It will never be so nice going adventures again, said Molly. Why, ever not, said a merry little voice, and the children turned round in joy, for there was Chinky, the pixie, sitting on the floor reading a book. Chinky, we thought you were lost forever when you fell from the chair, cried Molly, hugging him hard. Don't break me in half, said Chinky. I wasn't hurt at all. I just changed myself into a big snowflake and fell into the buttercup field. Then I caught the next bus back to the bottom of the garden, and here I am. I have been waiting simply ages for you. A snowflake, cried Peter. So that's why everyone talked about snowflakes. Now I understand. He told Chinky all about their adventures and how the pixie laughed when he heard about the chair kicking the bundles of the heads of the angry people. I wish I had been there, he said. Come on, now, what about a game of Ludo? So, angels, now our story is finished here, and with next story, I'll meet you soon. Till then, goodbye.